The man behind Sons of Anarchy and The Shield has decided to kind of weigh in on the kind of the big hype that is Game of Thrones and given us a medieval, somewhat fantasy epic series in the form of The Bastard Executioner. Now, the synopsis of this kind of series is a 10-episode series. It's somewhat convoluted, so I'm just going to read you the official kind of synopsis. The Bastard Executioner tells the story of a warrior knight in King Edward's I charge who is broken by the ravages of war to lay down his sword. But that violence finds him again and he is forced to pick up the bloodiest sword of all. Now that's the official synopsis. This is a 10-episode series that was originally on I think it's FX or Stars in America. And the actual main character is played by a character called Lee Jones, and he plays this character called Walking Brittle, who is basically this former soldier, as I say. He is basically forced to take on the guise of a fallen executioner to try and get away with the crime he and his kind of friends committed. But in doing so, he kind of ends up becoming embroiled with this local court, getting involved in all sorts of adventures and kind of deepening the ties that he's trying to sever. Ends up having a little bit of a romantic flirtation with the kind of the Baroness of this particular kind of castle, and involved in a variety of other sort of characters there. There's also a subplot here about a somewhat mystical subplot involving religion and a big conspiracy. There's a whole lot going on in this series. I'm not going to tell you too much because it really will sort of spoil plot points, but basically that's kind of a very, very brief synopsis of what this series is about. Now let's kind of rewind a little bit and talk a little bit about what this is like. So the man behind this, like I said, is Kirk Sutter, and obviously Sons of Anarchy was a long-running series that was very, very popular, and you can certainly see some of the sensibilities from that show within this one as well. Some of the way that the kind of plot unfolds is very Sons of Anarchy, and you will have some kind of actors that appeared in that show appearing in this one as well. But we're going to take it piece by piece. So we're going to talk about the positives and negatives. I'll start off with the negatives of this film, this series. I do not feel this is as strong as Sons of Anarchy or The Shield. So a few reasons for that. First and foremost, the leading man, Lee Jones, he's not bad, but I don't feel he was anything. He's not particularly charismatic, I didn't think. He's serviceable. So I didn't feel like you had Jax Teller, played by Charlie Hunnam in Sons of Anarchy. Very charismatic, really sort of, carried the show, had a lot of fans, and obviously in The Shield as well, you had, I forget the actor's name, but the main sort of character there, Mackie, I think his character's name was, again, very charismatic. This guy, like I said, is serviceable, but he doesn't kind of have that, he doesn't kind of grab you. That was the first thing for me. The second thing for this one, the pilot of this show is weak. This is an extremely weak pilot. I don't feel it's very well shot. It's convoluted, it's confused. You don't really kind of get a sense of what's going on, I don't feel, until right at the end of the pilot. It doesn't really grab you. So the pilot of this show is a particularly weak episode. I will say that the series does kind of get better as the show progresses. And but doesn't get off to a good start. So I feel if you just watch the pilot, it's going to put you off because you don't get the sense of this. No real characterization. Some of the choices that are made here, I feel, were quite poor in the pilot. The other thing I would say is you have Katie Siegel here. Now, she was Gemma Teller in Sons of Anarchy, so great character there, really kind of, one of the standouts of that show. And she is actually Mrs. Kurt Sutter, and I feel he has kind of jammed her in this show because obviously, he's with her basically and kind of wants to find a role for her, but her role feels so tacked on. You almost have two concurrent stories within the actual series of this one, and they kind of don't really kind of converge until the last season, and even then, the last episode, sorry, and even then I feel it really was two completely separate things happening, and I feel he has tried to kind of make room for his his partner basically to have a kind of a major role here, and she just simply isn't very good. She's kind of saddled with this kind of stupid accent, and really kind of sticks out a little bit to me. Her kind of storyline is to do with the more mystical side, which I felt was a little bit too heavy-handed. So I didn't really like those kind of side of it. It was somewhat satisfying in the final episode, I have to say, and it kind of ended on an okay note, I would say, although it does leave one major plot strand unanswered, and this is about the fate of a major character that happened in the pilot episode. It's never really resolved. So I wasn't so keen on the kind of the mystical side of it. I wasn't so keen on the Katie Siegel here, even though she was great as Gemma Teller. The other thing I would say as well is the romance between the two main sort of characters. Obviously, Lee Jones's kind of like executioner, Walking Brittle, and the Baroness Love. That's her nickname here. I don't know, it didn't really spark for me. I didn't really feel it seemed very forced. I didn't really feel it seemed like a natural pairing. These two, there were so many conveniences, and they'll come on to that in my next thing. There were so many conveniences here. They just happened to be in the right place in these kind of key times, and I don't know, I wasn't really buying it. But at the end of it, you can kind of see them together, but it just felt a little bit forced and a little bit artificial for me. And this series really does rely on a bunch of conveniences. You know, people are sort of saying some kind of like some very important information, and there always seems to be someone just around the corner who kind of overhears it. That happens multiple times in this series, and it's tricks that Kirk Sutter is using in his previous shows, and I feel he kind of rehashing them for this one. So there is some problems with this series. Let's talk about the positives now, though. I think this is very well shot. I thought, for example, the look of it was it really does kind of pull you into the kind of the time period, and that was kind of good. Some of the kind of the secondary characters are very interesting as well. I actually kind of quite liked some of the dynamics between some of the knights. The standout character for me, though, was Stephen Moyer, and you may know him from True Blood, and he plays Miles Corbett, who is basically the kind of the the politician of the house. And his character is by far and away the standout of this show, and he has got some real depth. He's very much a grey character, somewhat of an anti-hero, but he definitely has a kind of a villainous side, but also has kind of like, somewhat of a noble side to him as well. So, but by far and away, he is the most interesting character. I would say second is the Baroness, but head and shoulders above anyone else is Stephen Moyer's character. Very, very well realised, very well written, so fantastic job on him. There's quite a lot of action in this show, and there's a fair amount of gore as well. I thought that was very well handled. I think there's some really painful looking kind of torture scenes and executions and things like that, as you'd probably expect with the title of this show, and I thought they were done very well. There's one particularly gruesome one involving some horses that I always say, but there you go. I did like the arc of some of these characters. Like I said, there were in my negatives. There were some things that I felt were a little bit unresolved, but overall, some of the kind of characters I were kind of quite happy with them. Some of the acting as well, I would say, for minor characters was a little bit hit and miss. Just touching on the negatives. So overall, I have mixed feelings about this series. I recently watched The Last Kingdom as well, which I think Zara is going to review, and I personally felt that was better than this one. But I've seen worse. I think maybe if it does get a second season, hopefully it will kind of won't just keep rehashing the kind of the same things that we've sort of seen in Sons of Anarchy, which I feel this one doesn't do. This one does, sorry. And I don't know, they've kind of just got to reel back a little bit on using Katie Siegel's character, which just seems so forced into this. Anyway, that's my opinion. I'm going to give this series a 6.5 out of 10. What did you think of it? Have you seen it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.